While Notion is complicated, Notion Calendar is not so much. And especially in this video, I'm going to make it easy and digestible for you on how you can level up your calendar game using the new and exciting Notion Calendar. Notion Calendar is essentially a scheduling app where you can manage events and your time, but it goes and does a lot more than just managing your events, especially with the new integrations with Notion itself. So right off the bat, behind this new and shiny Notion Calendar, there's actually a dull and boring background story of an app called Cron. So Notion acquired Cron in 2022, and it was essentially a more complicated calendar app. And Notion Calendar is essentially a rebranding of Cron. But Notion Calendar now has changed the game. And although it's changed the game, there are some limitations. And I'll be going over some serious limitations of Notion Calendar near the end of this video. And these are limitations that I've tested out after a few days after launch, and I've noticed that most YouTube creators have actually missed. Starting off a Notion Calendar is pretty basic. Once you open up the app, this is honestly very simple because this is the most basic startup screen I've ever seen. It gives you one and one only option, which is to sign in with Google. So you can go ahead and do that. Or you download the Notion Calendar app, and it's even available on your phone, but only for iOS so far. So iPhone users are pretty lucky on this one. Unfortunately, it's not available for iCloud or other calendar users yet. Now, if you are an iCloud user, I have a question for you. Why not switch to Google Calendar? I made the switch about 2 years back and I've never looked back. Essentially, Google Calendar is way better than iCloud Calendar, and even though I had made a video on iCloud Calendar that went viral at 30,000 views, which is pretty big for this channel, I'm very happy with using Google Calendar now. But of course, we're talking about Notion Calendar, so let's get started. Once you've done logging in, you have your Google Calendar in Notion Calendar. Now I'm on the app version of Notion Calendar, and as you can see, this is the interface. It's quite user-friendly. You have your calendar on the left side, and you have your actual scheduling and the week look in the middle, and you have this interesting panel on the right side where you have more settings and features of Notion Calendar. So first we'll be going over the Notion Calendar features, and then we'll be talking about the special integration with Notion. In the Notion Calendar, essentially you have the two-way sync with Google Calendar. If you make a change here and add an event, it will show up in your Google Calendar right there. This is the Google Calendar, and I can see that the event showed up. That's great. Now it's great that we have the two-way sync with Google Calendar, but what makes Notion Calendar even more special is the fact that you can actually add multiple calendars. For example, your work Google Calendar and your personal Google Calendar from two different accounts, both into one calendar view. So essentially what you do is on the left side, you can toggle the one calendar that you have and click on Add Calendar Accounts. And from there, you can go and connect another Google Calendar of yours and see both of them in one place. Now, where this is super helpful for me is that I've been looking for an app where the assistant of my dad and my cousin, the two senior members at our company, the assistant can use their calendars and manage them both in one view. And the Notion Calendar will now allow her to do so. So that's a huge help that I can use using Notion Calendar compared to Google Calendar. When you add a new calendar account, it will essentially ask you to accept the Google permissions, and you can go ahead and do so. And after that, your calendar will start showing up in Notion Calendar. So once you have this here, of course, we have the two-way sync with our Google Calendars, and we also have our multiple Google Calendars in one Notion Calendar. Now, of course, we have the two-way sync and the multiple Google accounts, but this is made by Notion. But of course, it has these small features that make it very unique. In the Notion Calendar, what you can actually do is you can use keyboard shortcuts. For example, if you want to look at the week view, you can click W. If you want to see the month view, you can click on M, and it just quickly switches into these different views. And if you want to look at the day, you can just click on D. So that's very exciting. We'll go back into the week view now. And apart from this, another feature that it has is integrated multiple time zones. So from my understanding, Google Calendar allows you to have one more time zone that you can view, but in Notion Calendar, you can add multiple calendars. So you click on the plus beside your calendar and you can choose which time zone you want. This is very helpful for me. I've been working with people from Serbia, London, and from Canada, and from the States, so I can have these multiple time zones just available on the left side. Now this is just so brilliant and makes scheduling so much easier. Previously, I used to work by letting them know in how many hours I need to actually have the meeting, but now instead I can see exactly what time it will be for them and let them know accordingly. But of course, if you don't want the time zone here, we can remove or change the names and whatnot. So we'll remove that from the list. So that's a very neat feature. Of course, there's a vast amount of different features that Notion Calendar has, but I'll go over one of the last few features that is very, very exciting. Essentially what Notion Calendar has done is it took the features of Calendly and embedded that into Notion Calendar. Yes, you can officially schedule meetings using your calendar. The way to do so is using the scheduling snippet. So you click on share availability, and now it goes into this unique look of where you can use your cursor and select the availability time slots. So now I've selected from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then I can go into the settings of the availability and the scheduling link to actually collaborate with somebody and send them your availability. What I basically do here is I can change the name of the event. I can change what type of blocks they're able to book in. I can change the time zone. I can even integrate my own Zoom or Google Meets conferencing in here. Of course, Google Meets is there by default, but you can even choose other conferencing providers. You can choose which calendar it's going to go in, and of course, specifically the time. What's cool is you can create a scheduling link. And of course, once you've created the scheduling link, let's click on the link now. This is what it looks like, and this is very much a similar view from Calendly, and it's very nice and intuitive. Now, of course, not many people know this, but this was already available on Google Calendar using appointment slots. But if you prefer to have this all in Notion Calendar, it's there for you to do so. Now it's time to address the elephant in the room and talk about the Notion integrations. This is what I'm the most excited about. And let me show you how to go about to doing this so it's super easy for you to do. So just like how we connected multiple calendars, you can actually connect multiple of your Notion workspaces. What you can do is go on the Notion calendar settings, and then you can go into integrations, Notion. And from there, you can connect a workspace. Once you've connected a workspace, essentially it's going to show you the workspaces that are connected right here. I have 2 of mine connected here. And what we can do now is officially start embedding databases from our Notion workspace right onto Notion Calendar. Although this is all great, there is a limitation, and do stick around till the end because I'll be talking about that limitation so you don't make the same mistake that I made. So let's go ahead and embed a Notion database. I'm going to do it from this workspace. You can click on the dots and then add Notion database, and you can search for the Notion database. And I'm going to add a database known as events. So a use case of this that I'm implementing as soon as possible is that we have this Notion database for our company events. And although that's great to have on Notion as a calendar view, it wasn't really on our Google Calendar. So some people would make the mistake of not checking the Notion database calendar view, and they would miss out on these events while scheduling out different marketing campaigns. Being able to integrate the database Notion calendar view into the Notion calendar will completely fix this issue. So once I've clicked on the database itself, you'll see that it shows up in a certain color. And we can see that the color gray has been given to it, and it's showing up right here. So if I make that not visible, disappears from the calendar, make it visible again, it's in the calendar. Now this is amazing. So you might be thinking that if we just wanted to add events and look at their dates, why don't we just add that into our calendar rather than embed a Notion database? But if you know anything about Notion databases, you know that it's not just simply about adding an event and its date. What you can actually do is add notes about that event. You can connect that page with other pages. Now being able to see that database in Notion and also being able to see its events in your calendar just makes that database that much more powerful. One caveat that I do want to mention is that the database that you will embed into Notion Calendar has to have a calendar view or timeline view. For example, this view I can open in Calendar, but let's say I go on the table view, I don't have that option and that button of opening it up in Calendar anymore. So the database needs to make sure you have a calendar or a timeline view, and it'll be visible on Notion Calendar once you click that button. For you, integrating a Notion database into Notion Calendar could be possibly your school deadlines coming up, your project management, or anything that has a date property added to it. Now, of course, you've been able to add the database into Notion Calendar, but Notion Calendar goes a step further than this. What you can actually do is connect pages into that calendar event as well. Now, this is very similar to, let's say, Google Calendar, when you would embed a document and attach a document. For example, you can take meeting notes, or you can click on edit and you can attach documents. So on Notion, you can now officially attach Notion pages. So let's go back to an event. I can click on that event and actually add documents from Notion. So that's very, very accessible. And if you have a big workflow on Notion, and if you are working in a collaborative setting, this makes it that much easier to access those Notion pages. Okay, you're sold on Notion Calendar, you're happy, you're gonna make the switch over. On Notion Calendar, although you can integrate and embed those Notion databases, there are some key limitations. For example, I showed you only calendar and timeline views will be visible and integrated into Notion Calendar, but also you actually have a limit of only being able to add 10 databases. Another very minor limitation that I discovered during my last session in this course known as Notion Mastery, which is run by Ben and Mary, who are just fantastic individuals and they're absolute Notion wizards. During the last session, Ben mentioned that Notion Calendar has this limitation where if you embed multiple views from the same database, it won't show you different names for those views. So this can be confusing and will result in trial and error on which one you want to see. But although this is the limitation, I don't think this is going to be a deal breaker for me. Now that's it for this video. Of course, there is so much more to cover, and there are definitely some very, very cool new features that Notion will continue to add into this. But I wanted this to be an easy and digestible guide, and hopefully you are ready to get started with the Notion Calendar. I wish you best of luck. Please comment down below what you're most excited about with this release and what you hope Notion to integrate in the future.